Make sure you click that subscribe button below and click the notification bell. That way you'll know exactly when the next episode will drop. Welcome back, everybody. We are in season 20 of the Business Infrastructure Podcast, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by a very special VIP guest. And toward the very end of this interview, I'll tell you exactly why I say she's a very important person in my life. But I am joined by none other by Dr. Shanta Harrison. And she is the founder and managing member at HP Executive Solutions. She also has a job working for the mayor at the city of Houston, Texas, for those of you who aren't familiar with the city of Houston who might be listening outside of the US. Shanta, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Alicia.
It's so good to see you. It's so good to see you and to hear your voice. Let's get right into it. Well, first, I mentioned that you're the founder and managing member at HP Executive Solutions, but I know you also have this very important role that you're playing right now, working for the mayor, city of Houston, Texas. Can you tell us what is your official title there? Because I know it's pretty long, and I think the longer the title, the more important the role.
Definitely. I currently serve as the Deputy Assistant Director for Communications and Outreach for the City of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department. We interface directly with the mayor on his initiatives for solving a myriad of problems, including access to decent housing, mixed income usage, and not only the homeless pandemic, if you will, on some levels, but in addition to that, helping provide safe, affordable housing in communities where people can live and thrive. Extremely passionate about that work, and my background certainly plays into the role that I currently serve. So I'm elated to be a part of such innovative and impactful role in my professional life.
And this is the latest role that you've had in what's been a very long career in the government space. I know you have the unique position of being able to say that you've truly worked at every level of government, starting from local or city to state on to federal. Can you kind of take us back to the beginning? I think you were working with the Louisiana Senate. Can we start there and kind of give us a Cliff Notes version, if you can, Shanta, about where your work began? Because I know what's always impressed me about what you do is your advocacy for nonprofits, for small businesses, for women-owned businesses. So kind of take us there back to those days in the late 90s, I think it was, working at the Louisiana Senate. And how did you eventually get to where you are today with not only starting your own business, but also working with the city of Houston as well?
It is truly an amazing journey that I've been on for the last 30 years. I began in 1994. I was still a high school student, and I just haphazardly signed up in my guidance counselor's office for some type of work or work study. And I ended up being assigned to a local councilman by the name of Wilson Fields. He went on to run for office, and he became a senator, and he carried a few of his staff members with him, one of which was me. I was very young and had this opportunity to join the Louisiana Senate. I started as a page. A page is really the grunt work of the legislature. Back then, we did not even have the internet. My first job my first job outside of being a page. I sort of climbed this little ladder of sorts rather quickly. So the pages sat on the House or Senate floor and provided coffee for the members of the legislature, or they would go to the bill room and pull different legislative instruments and go to this little window in the bottom of the Louisiana State Capitol located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And again, I'm very much so dating myself, Mrs. Pierre, because there was no internet at that time. And you literally went to this micro library of sorts, and there's all types of documents and legislative instruments there at the Louisiana legislature. And so for the Senate office, after this councilman brought me with him, that page job turned into a number of opportunities. I started working in the public information office, and it's kind of like my career has come full circle on some levels because I now oversee a staff of 30 in public information for the fourth largest city in the nation. And so I am, it's just really humbling on many levels to see how far I've come and how much my career and how has garnered opportunities and exposure and travel and you name it. And so I'll share a funny story with you about public information prior to the internet. We would literally scan each and every newspaper looking for names of members of the legislature, particularly the Senate.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you literally would thumb through by hand, cut the article out, highlight the member's name, and archive it in this
Oh my gosh.
law library kind of situation. There was no Google, internet search, Bing. None of those resources existed at that time. And so from there, I continued on in Louisiana Senate, and I began to work in the law library. From the law library, it was on the 14th floor, and I became a webmaster for the Louisiana Senate. And that was a super interesting job because my primary role was really responding to constituents that provided or sent information in via the web. So it's kind of dating how long I've been there at this point, because when I started, there was no internet. And I'm still there 7 years later, and now I'm the webmaster. And so, so I ended up taking a leave of absence from the Louisiana Senate. A man by the name of Jerry Guiot, who's still the chief of staff there, gave me time away for me to go to Venezuela and do a little bit of missions work and study abroad for some time. He held my job. And when I came back, I was able to rejoin that office. And so from there, I went on to work for the House of Representatives, and then the Black Caucus was another job. And then I've worked literally almost in every office that the state capitol had to offer, from both sides of the legislature and various special interest caucuses, and then on to the governor's office, which is on the fourth floor there. And so I served under 3 different gubernatorial administrations, and most of which those times I served as the director of women's policy. I started out as a policy analyst assistant, and the lady who held that job at the time was preparing to retire, and I was in graduate school. And my mentor at the time, Phyllis Mayo, was the special assistant to the governor on women and children, and I advocated for myself. I'd been doing the job for maybe about 2 years or so, and I knew the office, I knew the work. We funded domestic violence programs for the state and family violence programming from an administrative perspective. So all of the funding and grant work to these smaller nonprofits in the state, we would take federal funds, which were VAWA funds, it's the Violence Against Women's Act, and it was braided funding, really. There were a number of different types of funds that came into that office, and we would subcontract and grant those funds out to smaller nonprofit organizations statewide to help women and children who are fleeing harrowing situations of violence in their homes. And so I found that work to be extremely rewarding, and I was thankful for the opportunity to impact people from an administrative level. So when I got the taste of policymaking, I ran with it and began to look at other opportunities for policy. And so from there, I was a press secretary and special assistant for legislative affairs for the Louisiana Workforce Commission, and was tapped and got brought on as the policy director for the Louisiana Housing Corporation. And I was promoted to the chief administrative officer, served as the CAO for Louisiana Housing Corporation, saw the current role that I'm in, was in the middle of the pandemic, had a desire to relocate, applied for the job, and got it. And so I took sort of like a little step down administratively, but trust me, this job is quite enormous, and we have an opportunity to impact so many people's lives for the better. And I don't take that, it's not lost on me, the power of the pen and the importance of shaping policy. Often people are not engaged until they see how legislative matters and policy matters ultimately impact their personal lives and businesses. And so it's been a long journey, but a very fruitful one.
And speaking of policy making and legislation, impacting businesses in particular, small businesses, I know you've seen a lot, with that 30-year span that you just walked us through. Can you tell us at what point did you start HP Executive Solutions, and was it in response to the things that you were starting to notice? And again, I'm thinking in particular about the small business aspect. Can you tell us a little bit more about your company, and when did you start it? Why did you start it? And what services do you all provide?
So HP Executive Solutions was born out of necessity. I was working for a gubernatorial administration, and that particular governor had gone out of office. And if anything knows anything about executive leadership that happens in corporate America as well, the new guy brings in their team. And so I was just a casualty of an administration change. But it's so good, and I'll talk a little bit about this later in our interview today, but having relationships and cultivating relationships and building positive rapport with people genuinely, not from a place of the perspective of what you can do for me necessarily, but cultivating and maintaining relationships is very important. So what I found is when myself and a number of other individuals who were in high-ranking leadership were let go on a Friday afternoon, I was in business on a Monday morning. There were a number of people that told me, I want to see you land on your feet. And from there was birthed the first contract for HP Executive Solutions. So within a week span, I had 5 contracts.
Wow.
Folks that someone had a conversation with someone else, and hey, this, young lady is great, but she just, was this casualty, and so here goes. So November of 2008 was when the articles of incorporation were filed for HP Executive Solutions. It was literally, I was given an investor, his name is Shanta Harrison, and he invested the initial seed funding to file the articles of incorporation. And the business was birthed, honestly, to house these contractual opportunities. And so HP Executive Solutions is a business outsourcing firm. Our tagline, or what I try to explain to people that we do, is anything that you hire an executive director to do or a senior level manager to do, we do. So we primarily focus on project management, compliance management, program evaluation, monitoring design, survey and data analysis. We do some training and board development as well, organizational culture guidance and consulting, a lot of community planning and strategic community planning falls under this, and work on communications, which, as you can see, it's a nature fit. And so organizational assessments and improvements is another one of our bread and butter types of things. And so HP Executive Solutions, through a program I'm going to talk about in a little while, was awarded a business expansion grant. And out of that business expansion grant was birthed this a manual of about 45 pages that helped me to expand my business to some aerospace consulting and specific market consulting, and doing business with the federal government as a government contractor. And so from there, I was able to acquire a number of certifications that I've learned are really important in the federal space when doing government contracting. I had a business mentor that was also a business owner in the greater Atlanta area, who encouraged me to be very intentional about ensuring that I found these different certifications and applied for them expeditiously, which I did. At the time, you could self-certify for some of these. I applied for the 8A certification, the women-owned business certification, the economically disadvantaged women's, I think it's called the EDWSB, is the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business certification. and then a DBE, the self disadvantaged business enterprise opportunity. And then at the time, the state that I was in offered a number of state certifications that I was able to go after and be awarded as well. And so I found in that federal space, it was really interesting that you have to be able to understand and know that language. If you need a SAM account, which is the Systems of Award Management, or a DUNS number, or a CAGE code, or a NAICS code, being able to learn that lingo and walk through the process. Each one of those pieces of this puzzle is a process in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so the journey was certainly not for the weary, but I found it to be a fruitful one indeed.
So you've been on both sides of this coin. You're literally on the side, and you've seen, you have a bird's eye view of what happens behind the scenes legislatively, again, from a policymaking perspective, things that are literally shaping not just communities, but the small businesses that function and operate within those communities. And then on the other side, you know what it's like to actually start a business and run a business and grow it from the ground up. So this is a very unique perspective that I think you bring to the table. Now, I know when it comes to the work that you're doing right now with the City of Houston, there's a special program that you wanted to share with our listeners, and that is the SBA Emerging Leaders Program. Can you tell us a little more about that?
The SBA Emerging Leaders Program awarded a number of opportunities for my business. It is I want to say, 90-day course. Okay. At the time it was in person, you go through it. It's a way that the government or the federal government reaches down to help small businesses as a trusted partner. And it's a free training program, honestly, that is implemented by the U.S. Small Business Administration, which offers small business owners powerful benefits by various learning experiences and innovative growth strategies, how to learn how to finance your business and financing know-how, and how to understand the new markets and network with peers. And what I learned most, the largest takeaway with the SBA's Emerging Leaders Program, is I learned how to work in my business and simultaneously work on my business. Mm. And so many small business owners have a challenge when it comes to being able to recognize how to compartmentalize the two. So often we as business owners get stuck in the weeds of the day-to-day management of the operation of that business, that we forget to work on the mechanics of continuously improving the business and its processes, and how to grow business opportunities, how to market and ensure that while you're working in the business, that you're constantly striving to attain and attract new business opportunities simultaneously. And so I often share that with up and coming business leaders, that it's imperative that one must learn how to work, especially as a small shop like our boutique consulting firm is, being able to work in your business and also work on your business at the same time. The SBA has been very good to me, and I found that once I relocated to Houston and I wanted to pivot and transfer the business to a more locally operated, I had kind of like a long arm, and I was doing some virtual work and that sort of thing from across state lines and a little bit of international work. And what I found is that the SBA offers so many free tools through some of their small business development centers. The one that I'm currently a part of is the Texas Gulf Coast Network. It's housed at the University of Houston here, and they assign you with a business consultant. That business consultant will work with you one-on-one. They'll give you a scope of work. You talk about where you are in your business and what those pain points are and the kinks. And there's literally a checkpoint, like a 30-point multi-system, as if you were to take your automotive to the dealer or to to any type of shop to get a repair or to make sure it's in good maintenance. That's exactly how I conceptualize the way in which the SBA and the small business development centers work. It's almost like a 30-point inspection. They come in and they ask you questions about your business and assign you with a one-on-one coach that is able to give you no-cost business consultation and a training and education and completing that statement, that scope of work, and also the accountability, because they're going to set follow-up appointments with you to make sure that you've met those benchmarks that were set forth that you and that business coach have agreed upon. So it's really a hidden jewel on a number of levels. There's professional development, there's monthly training programs that the SBDC offers. In addition to that, there's an annual National Professional Development Conference. So the SBDC has access to university level market research, which I found is very good for small businesses because you don't need to hire a consultant, which saves your business money and it impacts your bottom line. And so with that, they can provide market research reports for your specific industry. I think it's super amazing that with that national market research program, the SBDC can provide an economic analysis of where you are and the competition that's in your market. And so most of those individuals that are there to help you hold national and international certifications to do this work and to work with you. And so there's about 62 SBDC chapters, if you will, nationwide. And the Texas Gulf Coast network is one of those 62. They provide a number of specialty services that I found to be extremely instrumental in helping the business, from cybersecurity education to technology commercialization to international trade and export assistance. And there's numerous tools that are often underutilized, in my opinion, because people are simply unaware that these resources are available at your fingertips without cost associated with them. And I know for any business owner, trimming the fat and trying to keep your overhead low is extremely key to effective business management. So,
indeed. And you said something really important, the fact that it is like a best kept secret. And it shouldn't be, but we're talking about the government, and sometimes they don't always have access to the latest, greatest marketing or promotional type tools. They may not be the best at social media, getting that presence on Instagram and Facebook, the places where small business owners might hang out. They may not necessarily be there, or if they do have a presence there, it just may not be as hard hitting as, folks like us who actually charge people to provide services. Because I have another buddy, his name is Jesse Torres, and Jesse has been a guest on the show twice. And he also mentioned the same thing. He's very much plugged into the SBDC communities throughout the state of California. And he said the same thing. There's all of these programs that are out there, but people don't know about them. And so I'm so grateful to you for sharing more about the SBA Emerging Leaders Program, but then also kind of expanding that to say, hey, there's also all of these things that are offered through the SBDCs. Just for those who are listening and are operating businesses that are here in the US, definitely do a search for SBDCs that are in your particular state. I'm also wondering, I just wanted to see if you could humor me for a bit, Shanta. I was thinking as I'm listening to you, if I came up with a hypothetical situation, let's say there is a small business that is operating in a community that your organization through the city of Houston is actually, there might be some type of community development or urban planning type initiative going on within that particular community. When it comes to the policy making and the legislation that is being passed, some of the things that started coming to mind for me as I was listening to you is, okay, if I have a brick and mortar location, for example, within that community, and there's a piece of legislation that has changed completely, and it's completely different from what it used to be, I'm just thinking about changes to things like zoning laws, permits. You did mention certifications, licenses. How do you work, or how does your team, your organization, actually work with small businesses when it comes to bridging that communications gap? Because I can imagine, again, just a hypothetical situation. You have a, I don't know, I'm saying bodega. I know we're not New York. We're talking about Texas, but that's the first thing that came to mind. You have a bodega and you're in Houston, Texas, and all of a sudden some laws have changed, or because of maybe some of this urban planning or community revitalization efforts that you and your organization are a part of. How does that work? Can you kind of walk us through that process again, at a very high level? Because the work that you're doing is so plugged into the small business community. And I'm just trying to think, and it's probably not a fair question, but very generically speaking, how do small businesses kind of keep their fingers on the pulse of the legislation and the policies that shape and impact their ability literally to operate?
What an interesting, excellent, and comprehensive question.
Well, thank you.
It sparked so many different thoughts and memories of this very rainbow umbrella type of journey that I've endured. So can I start here? I'll start at when I was at LSU working on a graduate degree. I studied community development. My doctoral study was factors which influence client satisfaction with the services of community development corporations. So using that knowledge, and during that process, I studied zoning, land usage, blighted properties, brownfields, EPA standards, soils samples, historical usage of properties, due diligence on properties, title searches. It was so many layers that are associated, and there's bureaucracy associated with urban lifestyle, with the urban community. So in cities and states all across the country, here in the US, there are various laws of the land that drive the policies, and they all differ in various scenarios. So the city I was trained in had really strict zoning laws, and it was, real planning centered, and various areas were zoned for certain usages. And they're very extremely intentional about how that property was used in the past. For instance, if it had been used for maybe a gas station or a place where oil, motor oil of some sort was stored, it would have to go through certain regulations in order to be changed to be used for a different type of business or a different type of structure. Here in Houston, what I've learned is that it's a little bit of leapfrog development. And what that is depending on what the very immediate local economy is doing, development follow the trend of where the money goes. And there's not a lot of zoning restrictions here in the city. You can drive down any ABC USA highway, and you can literally see an apartment complex, a strip mall, so a neighborhood, a multifamily neighborhood. A single family neighborhood, and then a cow pasture. I literally have seen it in Houston suburbs. In many cities across the nation, there are specific usages of tracts and plots of land that designate place-based type planning for housing and for business. And so in this role, what I've learned in the city of Houston is, just to answer your question, in the department that I manage, it's the Communications and Outreach Department. And in that, I supervise, it's a division. The division that I manage, we have a number of sections. GIS is one of the sections that falls under the umbrella that I'm responsible for. That's the geographic information systems with maps and heat maps, and looking at populations and aerial footage and drones, and it's a lot that goes into the GIS. They use ArcGIS, and it in and of itself is an entire industry. And so supervise GIS, the outreach program. I mean, like communications and outreach. And I'm going to put outreach on the shelf for just a second. I'm going to come back to that. I also supervise the public information office, which heavily interfaces with the mayor's office, provides talking points, provides, info and snippets or what have you. I also provide oversight for the data and communications piece. So all of the federally funded, like we get federal funds here, primarily from HUD or because it's housing, but then there's a number of other community development block grant dollars, and there's a number of entitlement funds is what it's called. And so typically those are formula grants that are sent down to cities. Now I came from a state, and the city that I work for, much of the funds are very parallel to the funding sources that when I was with the state housing corporation and now the city housing department. But what I found is in the city of Houston, the city office is more than triple the size of an entire state that I originated from. Budgetarily, population wise, staffing, all of those things, because it's such a concentrated population, and much of these funds are driven by census tracts. I used to work for the Census Bureau in 2010, and I always work for 2 years, and I always harp on people about the importance of filling out the census because it drives so much of this federal funding. Your congressional representatives, there's so many things that are decided upon and driven by the census. Even as a small business owner, historically underutilized businesses, the HUB certification, where you build your business, is definitely being able to qualify for certain certifications or certain designations as a business. It is driven based on the census tract. So for certain census tracts, depending on the poverty level, and there are a number of the factors that play into whether or not you can be considered a HUB zone, a historically underutilized business zone, it's all driven on the census responses. And that's what drives, funding allocations, Title I funding for schools, even colleges, and so it's just amazing how the ArcGIS stuff is amazing how much data is relying upon this one source of data. And so what I did for the census office when I was there was called quality control. And quality control ensures that the census takers are actually really surveying people and getting the true information from them, and they're not just like making up something and turning it in the sheet. And so I just encourage and implore business owners to become familiar with their census data and the opportunities. Just a simple search online can reveal opportunities that are specifically driven by rural zones and historically underutilized business zones based on the poverty levels in that area and the area median income in those levels, as well as the driver. So, but back to your question, the partnership piece is important. Like we do outreach for the universities here, small businesses here, nonprofits, as well as other entities that are quasi-governmental entities or non-governmental entities as well. In Houston, the city council is the dominant deciding factor, or the dominant deciding body of much of the legislation and many of the ordinances that are passed. It is all filtered through city council, which meets, on Wednesdays, and the mayor is a part of those meetings, and the various council districts advocate for various projects that are beneficial to the areas, of blocking projects that are harmful to the areas that they represent. So to answer your question, ultimately, I think that, and I said I would go back to the outreach piece, having effective and intentional relationship building is important. And this is one of the things I was going to talk about with business owners. People do business with those that they know and those that they like. So in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that is one of the key themes that has been illuminated in that book. And so as a work of nonfiction, I think it's important that relationships are cultivated, because that is ultimately how business is done, not only here in the States, but I believe all over the world.
That's true.
And so, um, I, so that outreach component, getting outside of the walls of your office, and sometimes it could be hybrid, it can be virtual, but literally getting to know people. It's amazing what can be accomplished over a meal or over a drink, a coffee, or what have you. And so
I,
that would
I'm
be my
I'm
encouragement.
so glad you mentioned that. And I know we have to start wrapping up here. I told you it would go by really fast,
You
Shanta.
did. You
But
did.
one thing that I never thought of before until I started listening to what you were just saying, I'm envisioning a lot of times when we talk about business infrastructure, we're talking about people, processes, tools, and technologies, and how we link all of those things together so that businesses can not only grow, but scale in a profitable, repeatable, and sustainable way. When we talk about the people element of business infrastructure, typically on this show, and even in the work that I do with my own clients, I've never thought about the introduction of the policymakers, people like you having those relationships. But it's so key. It's so important. Even obviously these aren't people who would be on your payroll, but to just to have those relationships, especially for those of you who are watching us right now or listening to us, and you are doing work within the government space, you need to have those relationships. Add those people to your organizational chart. Again, they aren't on your payroll, yes, but they are indeed a part of your team. Having those relationships, again, keeping your fingers on the pulse of the things that are happening that aren't maybe necessarily within your control. And we can talk, well, we can't talk about it. We don't have enough time. But I was just thinking when you were talking about the importance of filling out the census and filling out the information correctly, I was also thinking, and this is why it's so important to also vote at the local level, because
I,
these things shape the environment in which you are operating your business, and so much more. You mentioned the book. You've talked about the SBA Emerging Leaders Program. You also mentioned the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm curious, as we start to wrap up here, Shanta, do you have any other resources that you recommend for people aside from doing a search online for their local SBDC? Are there any other resources that you'd like to recommend?
um, Yes, thank you for interjecting that question, because I promise you, Miss Alicia, you were about to cause me to build my soapbox and stand on it to talk about voting and its importance. And so I digress, and I will share some of the resources that I think are helpful, and maybe a little bit of advice for entrepreneurs who are wanting to learn the process of getting in business and staying in business. First, I would encourage, as a tool and as a resource for business owners, to find a mentor and maintain a mentor. Often we do start and stop relationships where we start out really strongly and then we back up. And it reminds me of a student learning how to drive a car or stick shift. We start and then we jerk back, and then we continue to. But the maintenance of those mentorship relationships are very important. I know in corporate America, we talk a lot about sponsorships and how sponsors can open doors and that sort of thing. But having a genuine relationship with the individual who has gone down the path that you want to go down and has a trip, fell, and bumped their head, if you can avoid those pitfalls, by all means, please do so. Talk to them, cultivate that relationship, maintain it, and not only call them when you need something, but call them when you can offer help as well. And then just maintaining that mentor. And having more than one mentor is certainly acceptable. There are no rules against having multiple mentors. And so that would be really important. And so back to the Dale Carnegie book. It's old, but it has a lot of wisdom. Just being able to understand what people like and knowing what they want to talk about, and learning as much as you can on that, I would encourage you to do. Partnerships, I think, are also very key. If you have lemons and I have sugar, and we have a third party who has water, we can make lemonade and open up a stand together. And so having the partnerships in place and having your paperwork in place is also very key. If you need to do an NDA, which is non-disclosure disclosure agreement, or if you need to do an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding, having the proper paperwork in place avoids headaches in the long run. And so just being very upfront about all of the agreements and the legal banter is super, super important. Another tool I would think, besides being online, is to research best practices in your industry of expertise, finding out what the industry standard is, what the trends are that are currently happening, and staying on top of that. And I think also using social media for resources such as courses or business incubators or grant funding, or sometimes people post like, oh hey, Hello Alice is offering this women-owned business grant and the deadline is March 15th. And sometimes those announcements come off the cuff. Now, you have to use discipline when using social media because it can suck up your time. So time management. So often what I do, I have a little egg timer that I bought on Amazon, and I give myself a 30-minute window and I set that timer, and I'm on social media. I tell people I make guest appearances because I know how my brain works. That entertainment factor, it is a vacuum, and it will hinder your productivity if you don't manage it and mitigate the temptation to jump down. So you can use social media to search by certain hashtags, hashtag woman-owned business, hashtag, whatever it is that your goal is for getting online in the first place. And last but not least, I would encourage business owners to remember your why. Whatever that pain point was that got you into business in the first place, and this may sound a little bit cliche, but so often we get so busy with the work that we forget about the why of the work. And so making sure that we remain driven and motivated and keeping that goal before you in some type of way. You can use your screensaver on your phone as a reminder. You can post in your car or on your refrigerator, or using a mirror at home or in your restroom, wherever that commonly visited place is, your screensaver on your laptop, whatever it is, to remind you. Begin with the end in mind and remind yourself what the why is and what your goals are. Helps to maintain that drive and that encouragement to stay in the race. And back to that business mentor, if you have someone in your corner who's going to encourage you to stay in business and not to give up, I think that's super key. And I had that, and I'm super grateful for the business mentor who helped me not only get in business, but stay in business.
And may I add to that? So to kind of piggyback off of the importance of having business mentors is also to have your tribe, people, other entrepreneurs, because it can be very lonely when most of the people around you are, I don't want to say followers and not leaders. I don't want to say that, but when most of the people around you work for someone else and you have made a conscious decision to work for yourself, to build something from scratch oftentimes, and you're just out there. And sometimes you need your tribe around you.
I agree completely. I imagine that that's also very beneficial for your mental health, because
absolutely
there's empathy that can be offered, or experiences that can be shared and garnered off of one another and bounced off of each other. I can imagine that that's healthy to manage stress, and also to know that you're not alone and you're not the only person experiencing the challenges and whatever potential difficulties or triumphs that you may experience as the business journey unfolds. I certainly agree. Thank you for saying that.
And the benefit, I was saying all of that to also lead into the segue. At the very beginning, I told everyone that you are a very important person, VIP, because not only are we in each other's tribe, but we're also family. Shanta is my cousin, everyone. The first relative I've ever had on my podcast in close to 5 years. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. But in all seriousness, there are family-owned businesses. A lot of times when we start our businesses as entrepreneurs, even if we don't have other people in our family working alongside us, it's it's difficult also to have your family kind of rally around you because they want what's best for you, and sometimes they can project their fears onto you, and that's the last thing in the world that you need when you're trying to build something. But you have to just learn that they're coming from a place of love oftentimes. And so the great thing about our relationship is we're family, but we're also in each other's tribe. We have each other's backs, and we understand where we're each coming from. And that is so, so important. And I appreciate you so much for coming onto the show and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. You took me down that trip, that memory lane trip, because I'd forgotten about a lot of your jobs along the way. But it was so cool to hear your journey, to see where you are now. And I know that there's far greater things that lie just over the horizon. So I'm happy, I'm grateful for you, and I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day, because I know you're very busy, to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for having me, and thank you for providing long-term inspiration for me and for my business endeavors. Blessings on your podcast and your business, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Be sure to click the link in the description box below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell so that you'll know when our next episode drops. Until then, keep operating smoothly.